We're going to get started. Okay, our next speaker is going to be Bernard Swiecki, Director of Automotive Communities Partnership and Director of Research Center for Research at the Center for Automotive Research. Bernard has written and managed research in a diverse array of automotive fields pertaining to automaker suppliers, relationships, electric alternative powertrain vehicles. He manages car analysis of vehicle sales, production, segmentation data. He has also led the trade missions to China, Italy, India, and Russia. Bernard has authored numerous articles for print publication as well as monthly column on the automotive industry. He regularly presents at conferences and industry events in North America, Asia, Europe, and is a frequent commentator in the local, national, and international media. Bernard is a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers and the Society of Automotive Analysis, and he has served on the U.S. Department of Commerce, Eastern Michigan District Expert Council. He received a BA from the University of Michigan and a master's in 2003 from Eastern Michigan University. With that, Bernard, please.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Am I coming in, or it sounds like I'm not? You can, okay. Then we will go with this. Thank you very much for having me today. I love the way that this agenda is shaped because you just heard from Carla about the rapid electrification of the automotive industry, how critical it is, and of course in Michigan, the industry is at the heart of our economy, and for educators, a very, very important constituent and customer of the output of our educational institutions. So my role on the agenda, I think, is to be kind of the middle part of a sandwich, because after me, you're going to hear from Michelle Uresti about the EV Jobs Academy effort, something CAR is very excited to be a part of, and it's meant to basically to continue addressing the training, retraining, making sure that there's an available talent pool for the automotive industry as this transition happens. So I've got kind of a two-part presentation, and I'd like to start by taking a little bit of a deeper look at electrification in the automotive industry, trying to get a feel for how quickly is it going to be happening so that we have an understanding of what is the cadence, what is the rapidity with which we are going to need to train a new workforce, but also retrain the existing, right? Because this is also a transitional thing. It's not completely new in terms of just new hires. And this, I think, gives you a really, really good idea. So there are two parts here. On the left, you see the production forecast for electrified vehicles, and you've got them here by the different sort of powertrain types that these electrified vehicles have. The most important one there is the darkest blue. Those are BEVs, battery electric vehicles, so they are pure electric, just a battery and motors, no internal combustion engine at all. And you'll see the rapid ramp up that we're going to have by the end of the forecast window in 2029. Just those vehicles alone, we're going to be making 5 million in North America. And then when you add the other electrified categories, you see the rapidity of the adoption of this technology really kick off. Now, today we find ourselves right here, 2022, right? We are at that point where the slope of the line has started to get much, much more sharp, right? So we know that there is an urgency behind this need. Now, on the left-hand side here, we kind of break out the scale of the transition. So that blue line that you see descending, that's ICE, internal combustion engine, and those are the vehicles that are basically not electrified at all. They just have the internal combustion engine and nothing else. And you see the rapid decline there, and as that declines, together you see the electrified powertrains starting to take over. So we know we're not yet forecasting that sort of threshold where we transition and the lines swap, but we're getting there. You could see that is not going to be that far away in the next decade. And so there are going to be new hires. There will be people new to the workforce that we're going to have to train. But there's also a workforce element to this of retraining, taking the people that are working on the vehicles related that are just pure internal combustion powered, and giving them the skill sets that they need to successfully make this transition, make sure that we're hanging on to them and giving them a future career as we go. So I really think, I mean, to me, this is powerful. And it's happening at a huge rate of urgency and speed. And it's really good to see efforts like the EV Jobs Academy that you're going to hear about here from Michelle, helping Michigan to stay competitive. And we're going to talk about Michigan and competitiveness here in a second. I did want to also share with you some data from a proprietary database at CAR. This is the book of deals in which we track automotive investment information announcements in North America from automakers and suppliers. And so here, we're just sharing with you the automaker announcements. There's a special note that's necessary since we're having this conversation here. Typically in Michigan, in this part of the country, for example, 2019, that is the year of a UAW renegotiation of the contract with the Detroit 3 automakers. And when these negotiations happen, we typically see announcements of investment guarantees. And the next one is in 2023. And normally those renegotiation years are peaks, but so urgent is this need to electrify, and particularly when it comes to battery plants, right? Because one thing that we hear fairly consistently is we'll talk to an automaker and we'll hear something like, the demand is there. We could sell more electric vehicles if we could produce them. And we could produce more electric vehicles, but we don't have enough batteries, right? And so it comes down to it's the battery that is the reason that we're not selling more than we are, even though the growth has been tremendous, as you just saw in Carla's presentation. So the urgency is such that no one's waiting for that 2023 renegotiation year. We had tremendous investment in 2021. This year, we tied last year's total for the whole year just halfway through the year. And you see the breakouts there by country in North America. Now, this is also that data goes back a little bit further, and then you see a little bit better that those peaks in those UAW renegotiation years, but we do something a little bit differently here. We, in light blue, show you the share of those announcements that dealt with electrification. And as you can tell, not only were last year and this year very, very high in terms of the total number of dollars announced, but it's almost all going into electrified, right? Pretty darn staggering share. And frankly, that's likely to be the case going forward. When we have a lot of automakers globally announcing that by the end of the decade or maybe by 2035, they're going to go either all electric or all electric just for their light duty vehicles. You're going to need to make that happen with all of these investments. And of course, as these investments go into the ground, they're produced, someone's got to work there, right? Someone's got to make this stuff that all of this is going to put the factories in for. So it's going in very, very large numbers. You could see nearly 40 billion total last year, most of that 36 billion electrified. So these facilities, you know, this is the year when it was announced, but it's a few years later that they actually are built and finished and producing, and we need to provide the workforce that is going to make that happen. I also wanted to show you, you know, in Michigan, where we stand. You know, where are we vis-a-vis our competition? And so here we just give you Michigan and only the electrified announcements, so not the total. And of course, 2020 was an odd year, so we can't really, you know, draw trends too much from that 2020 time period. But essentially, you know, to me, what really matters is the scale. So 2019, we saw over $7 billion of investment in Michigan. So far this year, we're about $6 billion. We have likely an additional $2.4 billion going in outside of Big Rapids that's still coming together. So I frankly think we're going to exceed that 2019 number this year and go onward and upward from there next year. So I did want to also provide these breakouts to you for our nearest competition of Ohio and Indiana. And what you'll see is essentially, yes, those plants are going in there as well. In this case, we're showing you Ohio. But the dollar amounts are not nearly as high, right? We're getting the lion's share here. And this year, really in Indiana, there was one major announcement that constitutes the bulk of that. But what you see is Michigan is kind of the automotive heart of the industry. And we want to make sure that Michigan is the automotive heart of the electrified industry, right? As the industry pivots, we need to pivot with it. And, I frankly think, you know how they say dollars talk? I think they tell a fantastic story here. And I did also want to show you the rest of our competition, because so far in this electrification race, if we go back about 2.5 years in total, so the last, starting in 2020 through this year, what you'll see is only about a third of the electrified investment in the United States has gone to the Great Lakes region. The South has gotten the lion's share, right? And so we need to compete. And one critical way of competing is workforce. We know from, for example, at CAR running the Automotive Communities Partnership, which is specifically for economic developers and the people that land these plants in a given location, we know the importance of workforce and how much of a factor it is in deciding where you're going to build that plant. And here it is again, this time on a state-by-state percentage basis, and you can tell 12% for Michigan, but slightly alarming numbers like 20% in Georgia, 16 in Alabama. Speaking of Alabama, I was just there last week speaking at an electric vehicle conference in Birmingham, Alabama. And let me tell you, they had over 500 people, exhibitors, electric cars, electric buses, and so on. And when you listen to them talk, they essentially believe that this is their opportunity to leapfrog, to become kind of the new nexus of the automotive industry. And that because they're trying to adapt to electrification very quickly, they believe they can start pulling from northern states like Michigan. So it's not just the need to satisfy the industry's needs, which of course is very real, but it's also the fact that we have competition that is trying to win this investment for themselves as well. And workforce is a critical way that Michigan can compete. When we talk about the position of Michigan, we often speak of Michigan as kind of the ideal ecosystem for automotive investment, and a huge part of that is the educational institutions. So if we are going to help address some of these competitive issues, workforce is critical, and we need to make those transitions happen. And now we transition in the presentation. We go from setting up, I think, the industry's need and Michigan's role in satisfying those needs to the fact that workforce is a critical part of how that is going to happen. And so I'm going to show you some data here from a variety of sources, but it's all related to CAR's work on the research team of the EV Jobs Academy. And I won't spend too much time talking about the Jobs Academy because that you'll get an absolutely wonderful deep dive from our next speaker, Michelle. So I will just say this, as part of that research team, first of all, CAR is thrilled to be included because we fully appreciate the importance of this work, and we love that we get to play a part in getting it done. And we've been working with a whole host of the partner organizations in the EV Jobs Academy initiative. And so the data that you're about to see, it really is, we call it the collaborative it really is collaboratively generated. So it is based on 2 different surveys, one done by the consultancy of the Boston Consulting Group. The Upjohn Institute has done some really cool analysis, and then we at CAAT took it a step further. We took their numbers and we broke it all down, did some nifty state-to-state benchmarking, and I did just choose some highlights. I really don't want to drown you in numbers. What I'd like to do is focus on some of the key takeaways and then let Michelle tell you how the EV Jobs Academy is actually going to function. So on the research team at the EV Jobs Academy, our role is really to take that automotive need, that whole ecosystem, and then frame what is the workforce environment around it. What are going to be the needs? What kind of people do we have? What are the educational programs that are going to be necessary to help them make that transition to electrified work? And so it is really a collection of the chief workforce players in the state working to make this happen. And so with that, I'm going to show you a few of the sort of kind of neat, punchy data points that we have discovered in this process. And this is, by the way, from the talent action team at MEDC, breaking down some of those surveys that I mentioned in my introductory comments. But you'll get on the next slide, you'll get a little bit of detail on the 4 most urgent categories here. But this kind of breaks out for you some of the key areas and then additional analysis in terms of things like how critical they are, the diversity gaps, and also the flexibility in degree requirement. And it's kind of nice to see this jiving with also what we at CAAT hear when we work with companies. Because, for example, production workers have a high degree of flexibility in degree requirement. And we also hear that because they're used to getting trained and retrained, they are likely to be less of a challenge than some of these other more specialized fields as we go. And here is a little bit of that breakdown. And by the way, this is just demand next year, right? It is just kind of a tip of the iceberg look. And by the way, I'd also like to say, I see some of you are taking pictures, which by all means feel free, but I've got my email address here on the final slide. I'm happy to share this presentation with anyone who would like a copy, or I'm not sure if the conference will be uploading it, but that is A-okay. So if you'd like any of this data, please feel free to reach out to me. And then likewise, if you'd like additional data, if you have questions, that's what CAAT is there for, so please do come to us for that. And I'd like to finish a bit of a point that I was making earlier when we talked about the flexibility and the adaptability of some of these jobs. We're also seeing the employers change their requirements. So things like not necessarily requiring a 4-year degree. It's more based now really on what it is you can do and what you know. So because of the scarcity, the requirements are being made less stringent. And I was talking to my cousin recently, and she's got a friend who was a nail tech, painting people's nails, did a few courses in IT and doubled her income basically in a matter of a few months, right? And that's possible when you don't require a 4-year degree to make that happen. And we're seeing those kinds of changes kind of throughout that electrified and techie workforce, much more so than in the past. We are really changing how we look for those people and how we actually classify whether they're going to be a fit or not. This data here is from the Upjohn Institute. They did some really cool analysis, and then basically we took some of their work and analyzed it further. And again, I don't want to drown you in numbers, so I just chose a few highlighted jobs categories. But this is a little bit of Michigan's standing in job categories that are important for the electrification transition. So not everyone in these various job numbers is working in automotive. They're just working in an occupation that is applicable to automotive, making that switch to electrification. So industrial production managers, in many of these cases, you'll see that location quotient being highest for Michigan. We really do have that fabulous concentration of those kinds of jobs here. And we will also show you, for example, computer, math, and software. These were kind of the 7 states that were deemed to be of the biggest local challenge to us. And as you can see, we don't dominate in all of them. Minnesota, surprisingly, in this category. And I did also want to show you engineering and architecture. And here, Michigan returns to the highest average location quotient, which, by the way, it's a complex equation, but it really just kind of shows you the concentration and the emphasis of a given category in a given geography. And you can see the dominance in Michigan. And so, frankly, what that has done is it's helped us create that ecosystem. It also means that we have the educational institutions to produce this workforce. It's just a question now of pivoting that and turning it into more adept at doing the electrification related training and education that we are going to need. And this is kind of cool. So the numbers on that chart correspond to these categories here numerically. And what you'll see is that the largest demand here was production workers, and the turnover rate is 51%, right? So I think this speaks a little bit to the fledgling nature of this. This is new work, and there's a lot of churn between employers as well. So there is retraining that we're doing as people switch not just employers, but frankly switch related work across industries, because this isn't necessarily just automotive. And when you look at the job categories that were most closely associated as the best fit for electric vehicle production, this is how those jobs break out in Michigan in terms of percentage share. And you can tell production, installation, maintenance, and repair are where we have the largest pools. Now, there was a question earlier, which I thought was a fantastic question, about earnings and income. And so, you'll see here some of these more technical fields across all industries, not as high as they are in automotive. And so, frankly, I think that's an opportunity to promote that if you are going to work in automotive because of the need, because of the urgency, you can do very well, and you can exceed the pay levels of that given job type that you would get in other industries. You will do better if you come to automotive, because again, we have that need. We need people to work in all of those plants that are going to be enabled by the investments and production starts that I just showed you. I also did want to share this with you. This is another output from the surveys that have been done as part of the EV Jobs Academy effort. And a few takeaways here. This is from a number of automotive suppliers, so we're very automotive specific here, about their job needs. And it's interesting here, mechanical engineers are at the top in terms of the most need, but for me, it's also fascinating how much of this is replacement workers, right? So we are seeing turnover and churn, and in the industry, that's one reason why Henry Ford doubled wages, right? Is because of the cost that's associated with training and retraining new people. And so for me, it's a really kind of a fascinating question as this technology matures and as it becomes more and more the norm of what it is that we manufacture. Are we going to see some lower turnover rates as well? And that is the end of my prepared comments. And again, you're going to get a much deeper dive into the work of the EV Jobs Academy, from Michelle coming up. I want to point out that is my email address, whether for a copy of this presentation or any automotive question you may have, please always feel free to reach out. And at this point, I would be happy to take any questions. Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes, you mentioned the state of Alabama.
Mhm. Yes.
From what I understand, the educational system in Alabama is like at the bottom of the country, maybe 47 or 48.
Mhm.
How are they going to leapfrog over such a poor performing K through 12 system?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. And in all honesty, yes, this has been the case since, for example, 20 years ago when we started the Automotive Communities Partnership at CAR, is that many southern states have had the disadvantage that you just spoke of. And essentially, the way that they address it is by throwing money at that problem. And that was always one of the value equations about doing something in Michigan. It is that, hey, maybe we can't quite offer the same amount of incentives, dollars on the hood for that plant to be built, but you won't have to spend as much on retraining or training that workforce because you're not taking someone working in agriculture or retail trying to turn them into an auto worker. We've already got people that know how to manufacture things. They are also getting creative. In all of the southern states, there are initiatives, and they're not necessarily unique. It's not like they're the only ones doing it. But for example, a few years ago, I got a tour of the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And they are doing things like the local community college has almost a satellite campus on the grounds of that plant. And so there's a whole lot of training that happens, of the employees. They don't have to leave the property. They can just go to the center and receive training. But they're also teaching other classes there as well. So you do have this cross-pollination between the degree granting and non-degree granting parts of that community college. And a lot of it is available just on-site in a kind of a satellite campus mode. So we are seeing greater use of those kinds of methods in the South, which partially, yes, you can give them credit for being creative, even though they're not totally unique. But partially, it's the fact that, as you just mentioned, they are starting from a deficit, and they need these ways to try and overcome that. Yep. Yes, sir.
Could you go back to your last slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm looking at the replacement versus the new on the mechanical engineers there, and I'm just wondering why you, or could you surmise why we're having so much churn in that particular thing? Is it the aging of the workforce? Is it just job dissatisfaction? What can you attribute that high rate of turnover there to?
Yeah. No, great question. So we talk to the companies and we have some of these conversations. And essentially, I think I would capture it as it is driven by scarcity. And the competition on the part of employers for these people is so intense that they are being snapped up and they're being recruited by headhunters. And so there's just a whole lot of traveling because you can get a better deal elsewhere. Also, traditionally in employment overall, regardless of industry, there has been a little bit of a stigma about changing jobs too often, hopping around too much. If you were interviewing for a position and you got a resume from someone and they changed jobs very, very frequently, that was kind of a ding on them as a candidate for the job for which you're hiring. And partially because of the pandemic, that has become normalized much more so than it used to be. And so we have made it less stigmatized and more common for people to have these rapid job switches, and they are headhunted quite aggressively across companies. And Carla, you wanted to say something.
One of the big issues with mechanical engineering is we just don't have students going into ME anymore. They're going to Chemi, they're going into double E, computer science, but all engineering schools are seeing a reduction in the number of students. We have a reduction in the number of graduates, and we have a lot of old mechanical engineers that are retiring. That's it.
Yep. Yes, sir. can we get let's try and get you a microphone, if we could pass that down, because you're just a little bit faint.
Being in the education field, I just had a comment about mechanical engineering. The traditional mechanical engineering has not moved from, you know, the thermo, the fluids, that kind of strength of materials, that kind of emphasis. And that needs to change. The bridge between mechanical and electrical has to be there. Because when I went through the program myself, of course, mine was much more traditional. The emphasis was always, you know, it was, you know, you don't have much to do with electrical. I don't know what the handshake level at this time is, but it's very compartmentalized. It's even in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Even in Michigan, it's very, very siloed. But I think that is breaking right now with all the things that are happening in the field.
Yeah, no, thank you. That is a helpful point. And it's obviously it's a change that needs to happen in order for us to meet these needs. And just one quick thought. I think there's also been an impression, right, purely psychological, of because things are going electrical and software and so on, that is the future of engineering. And it's kind of forgetting the fact that all of these vehicles still have moving parts. There's a lot of stuff there that requires mechanical engineering. I think in the mindset of students, they don't necessarily see it that way. And that might be also driving the demand a little bit. And we're just a little bit past our time. Do we have to wrap it up?
One more question.
All right, one more question, please.
Yeah, my comment about that is mechatronics is
Yes.
the field that kind of bridges. One quick question is, those who are retirees or people like me are near retirees, what do you think is like a part-time job or opportunity with flexibility?
Mhm.
I'll be on Medicare soon and I don't need healthcare benefits. I would like to work remote 6 months. Are those opportunities you think out there?
Yeah, no. So the answer is absolutely. Frankly, even at CAR, we were looking around for retire, and we've had fantastic track record of working with people that have been in the industry. They've developed a fabulous knowledge base, and so they are a tremendous resource. And so, you know, the other question is, you know, we're going to need the instructors that can make all of this happen, and we're going to need the experts that are going to develop what is the content of the curriculum that is actually going to produce these people. So I think for all of those roles, the people that you mentioned are invaluable, because, you know, that knowledge has to come from somewhere, and it exists in people's heads, and it's a very, very precious resource, especially given that, again, we're in an environment of scarcity. So, you know, it is a little bit of an untapped gold mine, or maybe not sufficiently yet tapped gold mine that I think will definitely have a big role. Yep. All right, with that, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Bernard.